Chapter 1. The envelope was thick. I found it wedged between the grocery ads and a dentist bill, cream-colored and too heavy, like it was trying to announce itself before I even opened it. My name on the front. No return address. Just the seal of the county court in the top corner. I already knew what it was. Drew had mentioned something odd the night before. Said his mom was acting strange. She'd pulled him aside and told him to be honest if anyone asked how things were at my house. He didn't say more. Just kept staring at his dinner like he was trying to memorize the pattern of his mashed potatoes. But this wasn't a warning. It was an ambush. I sat at the kitchen table as I opened it. My hand stayed steady. My jaw didn't. Emergency custody motion. Filed by Lena Miles. My ex-wife. It claimed I was emotionally abusive. Manipulative. That Drew had expressed fear of me. Fear. The document was long, padded with vague accusations and carefully curated quotes. Nothing specific enough to verify. But just sharp enough to hurt. She said I monitored Drew's phone. That I'd raised my voice until he cried. That he asked her to come get him more than once. I read it twice. 3 times. Every word twisting tighter around my throat. There were no police reports. No school complaints. No neighbors coming forward. Just Lena. And a signature from her lawyer. A woman I'd never heard of. The hearing was scheduled for Friday. It was Monday. I looked toward the staircase, listening for footsteps. Drew hadn't come down yet. I wasn't sure what scared me more, that the court might believe her. Or that my son might. Chapter 2. Drew came downstairs 20 minutes later. He moved slowly, shoulders rounded, hair a mess, earbuds dangling from his collar like he'd forgotten they were there. He stopped when he saw the envelope on the table. He didn't ask. He just sat down across from me, opened a banana, and stared out the window. For a moment, neither of us spoke. I watched him. He was 17, almost grown. Taller than me now, sharper around the jaw. But in that moment, he looked like a little kid again. Like the day his dog died. Like he knew something bad was coming but didn't know how to stop it. I kept my voice calm. Your mom filed a motion? Emergency custody. Says you're afraid of me. His jaw flexed. He looked down at the table. I'm not, he said quietly. I know. But the court doesn't. Not yet. He picked at the banana peel, not meeting my eyes. She said you were yelling last week. When we argued about the trip. I nodded. I did raise my voice. I also apologized. Drew finally looked at me. She recorded it. Not the apology. Just the part where you were mad. My stomach sank. She told me if I didn't support her side, they'd think I was lying, he added. That I'd get in trouble too. That last part hit harder than anything in the motion. I leaned forward, lowering my voice. You're not in trouble. Not now, not then, not with me. Drew's eyes glistened, but he blinked it back. I didn't say anything in the motion. I didn't write anything. But she's going to make it sound like I did. He pushed the banana aside. I didn't know what to do. I nodded slowly. That's okay. We're going to figure it out. Together. He didn't say anything, but his shoulders dropped slightly. The tiniest breath of relief. I didn't know how, or what it would take. But I had 4 days to prove I wasn't the monster she'd painted me to be. And I wasn't going to let my son carry that weight alone. Chapter 3. Court was scheduled for 9 a.m. sharp. We arrived at 8:42. Drew wasn't allowed to testify, not in this preliminary hearing. The judge had ruled he could submit written input later, but today was about Lena's claims, and my supposed threat to our son's emotional well-being. My lawyer, Martin, looked like he just climbed out of a filing cabinet. Smart, but scattered. He straightened his tie and whispered, "They're going to try to rattle you. Don't rise to it." I nodded, eyes already on Lena across the room. She looked polished. Crisp navy blouse, hair pulled back like she was heading to a fundraiser instead of a custody hearing. Her attorney, a woman named Reagan Stokes, was younger than I expected. Smiling faintly like she already knew how the next hour would go. The judge entered. Everyone stood. When we sat again, Lena's team started. First came the affidavits, statements from Lena claiming Drew had confided in her. That he dreaded coming to my house. That he'd said he felt controlled and anxious. Then came the audio. They played it on a tablet, propped up on the desk. My voice, sharp, frustrated, filling the room. I said no. That's final. You're not going across the country with people I've never met. Drew's voice, soft, but everyone else. Me again, I don't care about everyone else. I care about keeping you safe. Then static. No apology. No follow-up. Just anger. It didn't sound violent. But it didn't sound good either. Reagan turned toward the judge. This is just one example, Your Honor. But it shows a pattern. Mr. Miles reacts with anger and control, not conversation. Martin objected. This is out of context. And there's no statement from the child himself. The judge held up a hand. I'll allow the temporary order to stand. Full review to follow. Mr. Miles, until then, you are to have no contact with your son without supervision. The gavel hit. It felt like a hammer. I didn't even look at Lena as we left. But I saw her in my peripheral vision. She wasn't smiling. She didn't need to. Because she'd already won the first round. And I had 3 days to find a way to take it back. Chapter 4. The silence in the house didn't feel like peace. Martin had left half an hour ago, clipboard in hand, making vague promises to tighten things up before the next hearing. Drew had gone upstairs without saying much, just a tired nod in my direction and a quick retreat down the hallway. I stood in the kitchen staring at a half-full mug of coffee that had long since gone cold. Everything Lena said in court was by design. The carefully clipped audio. The strategically worded affidavits. She was building something. Not a case, an illusion. One meant to collapse only if you knew exactly where to press. But I didn't have the leverage. Not yet. I moved to my office. Opened the laptop. The screen blinked to life like it was waking up slowly, just as drained as I was. I pulled up old email threads. Searched my texts. Scanned calendar invites and cloud folders and anything else that might show context, pattern, intent. Nothing. Every message I found made me look reasonable. Too reasonable. It wouldn't be enough. Her accusations weren't built on fact. They were built on emotion, implication, and expertly timed silence. And the silence was working. I clicked into a shared drive Drew and I hadn't used in months, one we'd set up years ago for homework backups and school projects. Most of it was noise, screenshots, half-finished essays, memes I barely remembered. Still, I kept digging. Click by click. File by file. Hoping to feel something shift. But there was no magic moment. No sudden reversal. Just me, alone in a quiet room, sifting through fragments of a life Lena was trying to rewrite. I leaned back in my chair and exhaled. She had control of the narrative. And unless I found something real, something concrete, I wouldn't just lose custody. I'd lose my son. I didn't know it yet, but the break would come. Not from me. From Drew. And it would start with a homework assignment. Chapter 5. It started with whispers. First at the school. I got an email from the district HR rep. Vague phrasing. Concerns have been raised. A request to schedule a conversation about the home environment and how it might be affecting Drew's academic well-being. There were no accusations. Just concern. Just protocol. Then came the message from my department head. A forward, technically. Someone had submitted an anonymous tip claiming I'd exhibited volatile behavior and emotional instability in the workplace. Again, no formal complaint. Just smoke. Just the scent of fire. I knew exactly where it was coming from. Lena didn't just want custody. She wanted credibility. Control. And if she couldn't prove I was dangerous in court, she could still paint me as unstable in the court of public opinion. Her attorney, Reagan, was slick. I'd seen it in the hearing, how she pressed her hand against her client's back when the audio played, as if she were physically guiding the performance. Now she was guiding a narrative. One that extended well beyond the walls of the courtroom. At the grocery store, a neighbor who usually chatted with me near the produce aisle gave me a quick nod and turned away. At the gas station, a PTA dad I barely knew avoided eye contact altogether. The damage wasn't explosive. It was quiet. Controlled. That made it worse. Because it meant Lena had done this before. I sat at my desk late that night, rereading the HR email. The phrase that stuck was, "Your discretion is appreciated while this matter is reviewed." Discretion. Lena was betting I'd stay quiet. That I'd keep trying to be the reasonable one. That I wouldn't fight fire with fire. But I wasn't going to stay quiet much longer. Because upstairs, in that same quiet house she was trying to dismantle. My son was about to remember something she forgot to delete. Chapter 6. Wednesday night. 2 days after the hearing. Drew was at his mom's house. I hadn't seen him since the court let me drive him home Monday afternoon, with Martin in the passenger seat, clipboard in hand, watching like I might unravel. That brief, quiet ride home had stuck with me more than the hearing itself. Now it was Wednesday, and he'd only texted me once since then, a short message, "Hey, I'm good." No follow-up. No details. And something about the way he wrote it felt coached. Still, I didn't push. The order was clear. No unsupervised contact. I had to wait. At 9:18 p.m., my phone buzzed on the nightstand. I found something. 3 words. No context. No punctuation. But they landed like a dropped match. I sat up immediately and texted back, "What kind of something?" No response. The typing bubble appeared. Then vanished. Then nothing. A full minute passed. Another. Finally, a file link appeared. Shared from the old cloud folder Drew and I had used when he was younger, for schoolwork, project backups, the occasional playlist. I clicked. The folder opened to a single audio file. Audio_2023_April_ coaching draft. MP3. I didn't recognize it. Didn't remember naming it. But the date struck something. That week back in spring, when Lena's energy shifted. When Drew had come home with his shoulders higher than normal, his words tighter. I tapped play. Lena's voice filled the room. Calm. Controlled. When he says no, just look down. Say you feel unsafe. That's all. Don't get dramatic. Just let it land. There was a pause. Then Drew's voice again, hesitant, layered with something more than fear. Why are you doing this? Lena didn't miss a beat. Because your father only respects outcomes. If we want the court to protect us, we need to be convincing. Another silence. I don't want to lie, Drew said finally. You're not lying, she replied. You're protecting yourself. The court doesn't need details, it needs emotion. Let them assume. When he says no, just look down. Say you feel unsafe. That's all. Don't get dramatic. Just let it land. Then Drew's voice, soft, uncertain. I don't want to lie. You're not lying, she replied. You're protecting yourself. The court doesn't need details, it needs emotion. Let them assume. I stopped the audio. Sat back. Let it settle. Then played it again. Not a fluke. Not a misunderstanding. A blueprint. Word for word, Lena had rehearsed Drew like she was scripting a courtroom monologue. I stared at my phone. Drew had been holding on to this for months. And now, quietly, without fanfare, he'd placed it in my hands. I texted him back. "Where did you find it?" His response came a minute later. "It was still in our old folder. I backed it up in April. I didn't want to keep it on my phone. She checks sometimes." I blinked. Then typed, "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Didn't think it would matter," he replied. "But it does now, right?" I stared at the blinking cursor. Then wrote the only thing I could. "Yes. It really does." Lena hadn't just crossed a line. She'd recorded her own undoing. And Drew had given me the proof. Chapter 7. The file was just under 2 minutes long. But I played it at least 6 times. The first time was disbelief. The second was fury. By the third, I was listening as a father. By the sixth, I was listening as a man building a case. I knew immediately that Martin wouldn't know what to do with this. He wasn't a courtroom strategist. He was a checklist lawyer, civil, polite, and already in over his head. I needed someone else. Someone sharp. Fast. Ruthless, if necessary. That's when I thought of Maren Holt. She and I had worked together years ago, back when I was consulting for a firm that handled high-conflict divorces. Maren had been the only person I'd ever seen shut down a courtroom with a single paragraph. No theatrics. Just precision. I found her email address in an old chain and sent a message. Subject: Emergency Custody Motion, Urgent Review Request. Body: I know it's been a long time. I'm attaching a file I need your professional eyes on. I'm not asking for a favor, I'm asking for firepower. If you listen to this and still say no, I'll walk away. No hard feelings. I attached the audio file and hit send. She called me 6 minutes later. "You weren't exaggerating," she said. "You've been buried. This isn't just manipulation. It's scripted abuse." Her tone was clinical, composed. "Do you want me to handle this?" I didn't hesitate. "Yes." "Good. Then I need 2 things, the court transcripts and every written claim she's made so far. I want to dismantle her story at the foundation." "Done," I said. Maren paused. "And Garrett, send me a photo of your son. The judge will need to see who he's fighting for." I felt something in my chest crack a little. Not from pain. From the unfamiliar rush of hope. It was the first time since that courtroom door closed behind me that I didn't feel cornered. Because now? We were coming back with teeth. Chapter 8. Friday morning. 1 week since the emergency custody order. The courthouse looked the same on the outside, stone steps, pale sunrise, the same slow-turning security doors. But everything about the way I entered felt different. Because this time, I wasn't walking in alone. Maren Holt moved with purpose beside me, wearing a slate-gray blazer and the kind of silence that didn't invite conversation. She carried one folder, no rolling briefcase, no laptop bag. Just a slim packet of truth. And that was all she needed. But behind that calm, I knew how much preparation we'd poured into this morning. For the past 4 nights, I'd barely slept. I'd gone back through every email Lena ever sent me, flagged the ones where she implied I was unstable, pulled the ones where she contradicted herself. Maren had coached me through it with ruthless precision. "Don't just think like a father," she'd said. "Think like the opposition's worst nightmare." We built a timeline. Aligned her emails with school incidents. Charted Drew's behavior shifts. Everything we could find, cross-referenced and mapped. Maren had cut through it all with surgical focus. "What do we want the judge to feel the moment that audio stops?" She'd asked me the night before. "Doubt," I'd said. "No," she replied. "Conviction." We passed through the metal detectors in tandem. The clerk at the desk barely looked up when we gave our names. But when we walked into the courtroom, the shift in energy was immediate. Reagan Stokes saw her first. I caught it, the twitch in her brow, the subtle inhale. Recognition. And something else. Not fear, exactly. But a kind of recalibration. Reagan was good. But Marin's presence signaled something Reagan hadn't planned for. Lena turned next. She was in another navy dress, just like the one from the previous hearing. She sat perfectly straight, her hands folded atop a yellow legal pad. But her eyes flicked between me and Marin. Quick. Calculating. Judge Samuel Kellerman entered. The room rose. He was in his early 60s, tall and silver-haired, with a reputation for patience, but not indulgence. Known for his clipped sentences and total intolerance for dramatics, Judge Kellerman had presided over dozens of high-conflict custody cases. He didn't lean soft, and he didn't lean angry. What he did lean was efficient. When we sat again, the clerk called the motion. Marin stood like she'd been waiting for this exact moment. Your Honor, we are submitting an emergency request to introduce new evidence, an audio recording relevant to the plaintiff's claims and the emotional narrative constructed around the minor child. The judge peered over the rim of his glasses. You're referring to Exhibit C? Yes, Your Honor, Marin replied. Her voice was clear. Steady. The file contains a direct recording of a conversation between the plaintiff and the minor child. Reagan stood, trying to beat her to the objection. Your Honor, we object to the introduction of this file. The recording was not disclosed during discovery. The context is unverifiable and the manner of acquisition. The child recorded it himself, Marin interjected smoothly. He backed it up voluntarily. No entrapment. No spyware. This was a precaution by the child in response to ongoing emotional pressure. And the voice on that file. She turned slightly, looking toward Lena. Belongs to the plaintiff. A murmur stirred behind us. The judge tapped his gavel once. That will be enough. Ms. Stokes, unless you can cite a legal precedent invalidating voluntary evidence from a minor in a custody review, I see no grounds to exclude. Reagan's jaw tightened. She said nothing. The judge nodded to the bailiff. Proceed. The courtroom dimmed slightly as the AV technician cued the playback. The room was still, too still. Even the creak of benches had stopped. The audio began. Lena's voice came through the speakers, sharp and intimate. When he says no, just look down. Say you feel unsafe. That's all. Don't get dramatic. Just let it land. Then Drew. Why are you doing this? A beat? Then Lena again. Because your father only respects outcomes. If we want the court to protect us, we need to be convincing. I don't want to lie. You're not lying. You're protecting yourself. The court doesn't need details, it needs emotion. Let them assume. The room remained frozen long after the final word. 10 seconds of nothing. No coughs. No shuffling papers. Just the reality of what had been heard echoing through every wall. The judge finally spoke. Let's take a recess. 10 minutes. He rose before anyone else did. Left his gavel resting on the bench. Lena sat motionless. Her expression didn't break, not exactly. But her eyes had shifted. Gone wide. Less sure. Like she wasn't sure who had just spoken in that recording, or how long that voice had been following her. I didn't turn to look at her. I looked at Marin instead. She met my eyes. Gave the smallest nod. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I didn't feel accused. I felt armed. Chapter 9, A New Ally. The hallway outside the courtroom buzzed with a low current of whispers, lawyers murmuring, shoes clicking on tile, the metallic snap of briefcases being shut a little too hard. But I barely noticed. My entire focus had tunneled to one thing, the folder Marin was holding. She didn't speak at first. just led us to an alcove near the vending machines, where the fluorescent lighting buzzed like static. It landed, she said finally, flipping the folder open. Exactly how we needed. Kellerman's expression was neutral, but his hands were telling. He didn't jot a single note during playback. That means he was listening. I exhaled for the first time in what felt like hours. What happens now? Now we go on offense. I'm filing a motion to disqualify Lena's previous statements and get the supervised visitation reviewed. But we'll need more than one audio file. I blinked. There is no more. That was it. Marin raised an eyebrow. Then we make it count. But I'll need full access to your communications, school records, any signs of psychological impact on Drew, anything that shows a pattern. I nodded. Done. I'll get it to you by tonight. She snapped the folder closed. Also, we're adding a formal complaint about coaching a minor to lie under oath. That puts this on the court's radar for potential perjury. That one hit me like a slap. I hadn't let myself use that word. Perjury. It made everything feel more criminal. Because it was. A few feet away, Reagan and Lena were locked in an argument that didn't look quiet anymore. Lena's voice had gone sharp, her hands moving in clipped gestures. Reagan kept glancing over, and each time she did, her expression slid further into grim. I turned back to Marin. Why'd you take this case so fast? I asked quietly. You didn't even hesitate? She looked at me, and for the first time, there was something warmer beneath her armor. Because I've seen what this does to kids when no one steps in. And because your son had the courage to save himself. The least I can do is meet him halfway. For the first time in days, I felt something settle. Not peace. Not yet. But momentum. And this time, it was mine to carry forward. Chapter 10, Motion to Strike. Monday morning arrived colder than expected, gray clouds pulling above the courthouse like they were waiting for a verdict too. After the 10-minute recess on Friday, Judge Kellerman had returned to the bench with a clipped tone and a firm directive. This court requires time to review the implications of what was heard, he said. The recording stands, but any additional motions must be filed formally. We reconvene Monday. That was it. No rulings. No immediate changes. Just the quiet boom of protocol. Marin hadn't waited. She filed the motion at 7:04 a.m. sharp on Monday. By 10:30, we were back in Kellerman's courtroom. This time, the benches weren't just filled with attorneys. A few teachers from Drew's school had shown up. So had a member of the school board, trying to stay low profile in the back row. Word had spread. The judge entered with his usual quiet efficiency. We're here to review the emergency motion to strike portions of prior testimony, and to evaluate the request to amend the current custody restrictions, he said, folding his hands neatly on the bench. Ms. Holt, proceed. Marin stood, smooth and composed. Your Honor, the recording submitted last week illustrates not only premeditated coaching of a minor, but also raises questions about the integrity of the testimony provided by Ms. Lena Morgan in the original custody determination. We are requesting two outcomes: first, that Ms. Morgan's claims of emotional harm be stricken from the record, and second, that the existing supervised visitation requirement for Mr. Garrett Cross be lifted immediately. Reagan rose slowly. Your Honor, we maintain that the clip presented is out of context. Emotional discussions between a parent and child are complex. One moment of ambiguity should not outweigh the broader pattern of concern that led to supervised visitation. Kellerman adjusted his glasses. Ms. Stokes, would you define ambiguity? Reagan hesitated. A lack of full context. The emotional landscape of families is nuanced. Indeed. And yet in that file, Ms. Morgan gave specific instructions to her son on how to fabricate distress for court. That is not nuance. That is direction. Reagan didn't respond. Kellerman continued. You may argue context, but the tone, structure, and purpose of those words were unmistakable. I will allow the motion to strike the plaintiff's claims of emotional harm. Lena stiffened beside her attorney. Furthermore, the judge added, flipping through the revised custody order, until this matter is fully reviewed, I am lifting the supervised visitation clause for Mr. Cross. Future visits shall be unsupervised unless and until new evidence warrants review. He paused. And finally, Ms. Holt, your filing included language regarding potential perjury. I am referring that portion to the State Ethics Review Board. We will revisit it pending their recommendation. The gavel tapped once. It wasn't final. But it was movement. And Lena knew it. Chapter 11, In Court Again. By the time we returned for the evidentiary review hearing on Thursday, the case had shifted from a private custody battle to a very public reckoning. The local paper had picked it up. The headline wasn't subtle. Mother accused of coaching son to lie in family court. Garrett's phone had been vibrating nonstop, texts from old coworkers, friends, even the principal from Drew's middle school who offered to send in a character affidavit if needed. Inside the courtroom, the air felt different. Not heavier. Just more alert. Lena sat tighter than usual, lips pressed so hard they'd lost color. Reagan's binder was overstuffed and chaotic. She shuffled papers more than usual, her usually crisp composure fraying. Garrett sat beside Marin, who looked like she'd just come from a chess match she already won. Judge Kellerman entered. This session will focus on evidentiary consistency and the credibility of parties involved. The court will hear from the minor child only if necessary. That part made Garrett tense. He didn't want Drew pulled in, not again. But it didn't come to that. Marin presented 3 new exhibits: school incident logs showing Lena's escalating absences from conferences, a teacher's email expressing concern about Drew's sudden shift in demeanor last semester, and a note from the school counselor dated 2 weeks before the recording was made, flagging Drew's anxiety around court-related questions. But then she pivoted. Your Honor, Marin said, we are also submitting documentation regarding the plaintiff's coordinated attempts to harm Mr. Cross's professional standing. She handed up a stack of printouts, HR correspondence, voicemail transcripts, and call logs from Garrett's employer. In the 3 weeks preceding the original hearing, Ms. Morgan called Mr. Cross's supervisor on 4 separate occasions. Each time, she used language suggesting he was unstable, aggressive, and a danger to students. We also have a forwarded email in which she anonymously reported him to the school board for fabricated infractions. Kellerman's brow furrowed. Marin continued. We will not pursue the defamation claim here, but we are preparing one. For now, we offer it as context for motive. Before the final blow, there was a moment of quiet strength. Earlier that week, Drew had handed Garrett a slim folder. They were back in the house together now, no supervision, no strained silence. Just father and son, easing into something that almost felt like normal again. Drew had smiled for the first time in weeks when he walked through that front door. I want to be here, he'd said. I want this to stop. Inside the folder were a few handwritten index cards, notes Lena had made him rehearse. Coaching prompts. Language tips. One had smudged ink, like it had been handled too many times by nervous fingers. Drew had also recorded a short video. Just 60 seconds. A quiet statement of his own. I was told what to say in court. I didn't feel unsafe with my dad. I never did. I just wanted to make her happy. But I want to live with my dad now. And I want to stop pretending. Marin reviewed the materials and flagged them immediately. Then came the final blow. Marin submitted the original coaching notes Drew had given Garrett, handwritten, familiar. A match to Lena's handwriting on file from previous court submissions. One entry read. Tone. Sincere but quiet. Practice twice. Let him finish your sentence to sound natural. Another said. Remind him dad's angry voice equals courtroom danger. Reinforce safety theme. The judge read them silently, then passed them back. Unless the plaintiff wishes to amend her prior testimony, Judge Kellerman said, This court sees little reason to continue treating this as a misunderstanding. Lena didn't speak. Neither did Reagan. The courtroom was so still it felt like something sacred had just been broken open. Outside, reporters waited. But inside, Garrett could feel the shift again. It was Lena's story that was unraveling now. Not his. Chapter 12, The Blowback. By Friday morning, the blowback had officially begun. The local school board, having been indirectly dragged into the case through Lena's earlier accusations, issued a cautious clarification. They noted that no formal complaints against Garrett Cross had ever been filed with them, and that their staff had cooperated fully with the court when asked. It wasn't an apology, but it was distance. They didn't want their name tethered to Lena's narrative anymore. Garrett's inbox overflowed with messages. Colleagues from his department reached out, some with guarded support, others more boldly. Parents of his students emailed too, a few with offers to speak on his behalf. Teachers forwarded screenshots of neighborhood threads, posts that had once spread rumors now flipping in tone, filled with shock, support, and in many cases, quiet rage. One teacher wrote, "I believed her at first. I'm so sorry. I had no idea what she was doing to Drew, or to you." But it wasn't just apologies. It was withdrawal. Lena's family started backing away. Her sister unfriended her on every platform. Her mother canceled a planned brunch and never rescheduled. A cousin removed Lena's name from a shared family group chat with no explanation. Even among her inner circle, silence started to spread. Her Pilates group stopped tagging her in posts. A local friend's bakery removed a sponsored shout-out Lena had paid for. By Saturday, her personal blog had quietly been set to private. At Drew's school, word traveled fast, but this time it didn't land like gossip. It landed like relief. Teachers adjusted their tone. Staff who once gave Garrett cool nods now offered warm hellos. And the most unexpected shift came from Reagan herself. On Monday, Marin received a call. "I'm withdrawing as counsel," Reagan said. "Lena will need to secure new representation if she wishes to continue. I'm done." No elaboration. No formal excuse. Just professional detachment, like someone stepping off a sinking ship. Garrett played Drew's video again that night. Not because he needed proof, but because hearing his son's voice, the clarity in it, made something inside him finally quiet. He had stopped fighting just for custody. Now he was fighting for truth. For Drew's voice. For the version of the story that had nearly been buried. And people were finally listening. That weekend, he and Drew made pancakes together, aprons on, music playing. No script. No anxiety. Just a quiet Saturday morning. The kind Garrett thought he might never get back. Chapter 13, Custody Restored. The hearing was scheduled for Thursday morning, 8 days after Garrett filed the emergency motion, and just 3 days after the evidentiary review. Fast, but not rushed. The court had seen enough to act. The courtroom felt warmer that morning, Thursday. Not because of the temperature, Kellerman's courtroom always ran cool, but because of the quiet, steady confidence Garrett hadn't felt in months. Maybe longer. Drew sat beside him this time. Not on the stand. Not behind a screen. Just there. In a navy blue sweater, posture relaxed, shoulders steady. Calm. Marin opened the session with her usual precision. "Your Honor, the defense respectfully moves for a formal revision of the custody arrangement, pursuant to the evidence presented in the court's previous rulings." Kellerman glanced over his glasses. "And the terms you're requesting?" "Primary custody awarded to Mr. Cross," Marin replied. "With educational and medical decision-making authority vested fully in the custodial parent. We are also requesting a suspension of unsupervised contact with Ms. Morgan until further psychological review." Reagan wasn't there. Lena had come alone. She looked tired. Smaller. Her once razor-sharp heels were now worn flats. Her hair, unstyled. No makeup. Just eyes that flicked briefly toward Drew and then away. She didn't speak. Kellerman read over the file in silence. Then, "The request is granted. No preamble. No delay." He signed the revised order and slid it across the bench. "Custody is hereby transferred to Mr. Garrett Cross, effective immediately. Ms. Morgan's visitation will be supervised and limited to times deemed appropriate by the court, pending full review. This case will remain open for final disposition pending recommendations from the Ethics Review Board." Garrett exhaled. Not relief, exactly. More like return. Drew reached over and gripped his hand. The courtroom around them dissolved. Just for a second. Because that was it. The narrative had shifted. And this time, it was real. On the way out, a woman from the clerk's office stopped them. "Mr. Cross," she said softly. "I just wanted you to know, I think what you did for your son. It matters." Garrett didn't know how to answer. So he just nodded. Because she was right. And Drew already knew. Chapter 14, The Truth Comes Out. The story didn't fade. It grew. Local outlets covered the final custody ruling, but it didn't stop there. A regional parenting blog picked it up, then a syndicated legal podcast. Within a week, Lena's name trended on a parenting subreddit known for vetting high-conflict custody cases. They dissected the court filings, the leaked coaching notes, and Drew's brave video. People had opinions. Loud ones. But Garrett didn't care about going viral. He cared about what came after. Drew was sleeping through the night again. They ate together. Laughed sometimes. Watched terrible sci-fi movies and ranked them with a homemade scoring rubric. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. Meanwhile, Lena's unraveling picked up speed. Her job placed her on extended leave. Her license, one she'd used in a part-time family counseling practice, was now under ethics review. Old friends distanced themselves. One, a former bridesmaid, sent Garrett an apology letter that ended with, "I should have seen it sooner. I'm so sorry for enabling her." Lena's own father, who'd stayed silent through the hearings, called Garrett privately. "I don't know what to say," he began. "But I watched the video. I saw my grandson. And I believe him." The pieces started falling into place a few days later. It had taken Garrett a long time to admit, even to himself, why the marriage ended. Lena hadn't cheated, hadn't abandoned them. But she had become someone he didn't recognize. Every conversation had turned into a test. Every parenting choice, a negotiation. It wasn't about Drew, it was about power. And Garrett had finally stopped playing. The divorce hadn't been explosive. Just inevitable. A slow erosion. But he'd underestimated how deeply Lena resented being the one left. Drew found an old draft email on the family laptop, one Lena had typed but never sent. It was dated 6 weeks before the first custody motion. "If Garrett thinks he can replace me, he's delusional. Let's see how his perfect little life holds up when people know what kind of man he really is." It clicked. The co-parenting therapy. The invitation she'd extended, masked as concern for Drew. Garrett had turned her down. Not unkindly. But clearly. And 2 weeks later, the calls to his employer had started. She hadn't wanted shared custody. She wanted control. When that failed, she'd gone for destruction. Then, a local nonprofit invited Garrett to speak, just a small panel on listening to teens in high-conflict custody disputes. He hesitated, but Drew nudged him. "Tell them what happened. Maybe it'll help someone else." So he did. He stood on that stage and told the story, not the courtroom version, but the real one. The messy, terrifying, gut-wrenching truth of being a father falsely accused. Of watching your kid get weaponized. Of surviving the slow erosion of credibility, and rebuilding it, one person at a time. The panel moderator handed him a thank you card at the end. Inside it, a line written in looping blue ink. Clean audio. Clean slate. Garrett smiled. That's what it was now. Not victory. Not revenge. Just clarity. And that was enough. Epilogue, clean audio, clean slate. The old shared folder still existed. It wasn't on the cloud anymore. Garrett had pulled everything offline after the custody ruling, but the files remained on a password-protected flash drive. Drew's recordings, the coaching notes, screenshots, metadata. The kind of digital debris you only keep when you're forced to. Until now. They sat together at the kitchen table, Saturday morning sunlight warming the counters. Garrett slid the flash drive between them. You sure? He asked. Drew nodded. We don't need it anymore. Garrett opened his laptop. Inserted the drive. They watched as he deleted each folder, one by one. Confirmations clicked. Screens flickered. Final prompts disappeared. The screen went blank. Drew let out a breath he'd been holding for years. Not because of what the files contained, but because he didn't have to live under them anymore. Garrett closed the lid and stood. Breakfast? French toast, Drew said, already pulling out the eggs. Garrett grabbed the frying pan. As he turned toward the stove, he paused. Hey, he said. Drew looked up. Thanks for trusting me. Even when it got really hard. Drew just shrugged and smiled. You always listened. Even when no one else did. Outside, the wind shifted. Somewhere, church bells rang. But inside, the kitchen was quiet. Safe. Whole. And finally, free.
Thanks so much for watching. If you love a good revenge story, or if you've ever dreamed of getting the last word without saying much at all, you're in the right place. Be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new savage ending. Because around here, karma always hits different.